Chapter 31. The Gan was the name of the train that would take them to Farina, and John hadn't lied. The carriages were small and filled with the hard sit-up seats, although in first class they were padded. Fleur and John were both lucky enough to be in that compartment. I never usually travel first class, John told her, but finishing my training and becoming a qualified pilot felt special, so I treated myself. Fleur grinned. Well, I've never taken such a long train journey, and I purchased a first class ticket because I had no idea what to expect. For instance, what's all that noise at the back? He laughed. They reserved the last carriage on these trains for the gangs of fettlers and railway workers. They've all done a week, or probably more, hard at it on the tracks, so now they're heading home to their families. The train will stop at every tiny, far-flung railway station to let them off, and the further we go, the drunker they become. As he finished saying that, they heard a crash of glasses. Another long neck shatters in the dust, he explained. They're all pretty rough lads. You'll never get their names. They go by the names of Lefty or Jacko, Crow or Budgie. Fleur chuckled. Tom used to work in a shearing shed and explained it's much the same. It's exactly all characters, all some staying out of the way of mainstream life, others dodging the law, but though all of them drink and smoke a lot. They heard more bottles shatter beside the slow-moving train as it continued its journey into the late afternoon. They crossed some bridges and the train started to rattle loudly, the chairs squeaking, and Fleur began to feel her body bouncing in a way it hadn't previously. Where are we now? She asked, coming into Corn and onwards to Hawker, he said. It meant nothing to her, though she recalled that Jamie Wren had mentioned the town of Corn. She told John, yes, all the new recruits from the station all over this region would have left for their training, and perhaps for Europe, from Corn Station. It's where East meets West in railway terms, he said, with a grin. Great romantic train journeys that cross the vast continent, and all the young men of our age gathered at Corn to defend their king. It did sound romantic and also brave. Fleur wondered if John would have to defend his king soon. She gazed across the saltbush plain, where in the far distance she could see a blue outline of hills to the east. After their stop at Corn, the sun was dipping low, and the temperature was falling. The train began to pick up speed as it strained to get over hills to reach Hawker. She pointed, and John craned his neck around to see. That's the start of the Flinders Ranges, she explained. Soon you'll see that bluish line become a purple range. They're incredibly beautiful at sunrise or sunset. Pulling into Hawker at around 6:30, Fleur was beginning to feel the hours of the journeys tugging at her lids, and her body no longer sat pertly upright. Sagging into the evening, she hoped it wouldn't be a long stop, but it was another half hour to take on water, and the railway gang at the bank had been increasingly rowdy and rapacious. They'll start to thin soon. We'll be dropping them off regularly from here on, John assured her. Do you want anything from the refreshment room? It's my turn. Nothing, thank you, she yawned. I might get another tea, he said, and while he was gone, Fleur wandered the platform in the other direction, from where all the singing and explosive laughter emanated. She looked back over the train with its maroon paint now covered in the thick rust-coloured dust of the landscape. They wandered their way through. It was twilight. There was still just enough light to enjoy the scenery, but Fleur felt a true sense of the day ending. By the time they stepped back on the train, the climb began north into the Flinders Ranges proper now, towards a place that John called Hookina. All these curious names like Paracelina and Beltana. She never heard of them. John pointed out places called Devil's Peak and Willow's Holt, Wilpena Pound, which John mentioned with a note of awe in his voice. Was not something she could pick out, but she nodded as she gestured at a tall range that looked to be on fire from the way the setting sun lit stripes of craggy mountain tops, a burnished globe orange reflecting its furnace. It was beautiful enough to win a sigh from her. The response was pure and primitive, bathing her heart, it seemed, with an emotion she couldn't name other than a sense of reverence. The fiery ranges made her feel small and inconsequential, a mere mote in time for these giants who had guarded this land, looking down upon it for millennia. Curiously, the surge of sentiment made her want to be in Tom's arms even more, and she hadn't thought her passion could run any harder or deeper for him. This was Tom's country. The Flinders Ranges had held him in their wrinkled, encircling ruggedness for his whole life, and then they gave him to her As far as Tom knew, she'd rejected that gift. Irma's cruelty knew no bounds. I have to make this right, she repeated in her mind, and cast a thought to the rough, stony mountains that she would make good on her promise. The train frequently was slow to a halt, but barely paused longer than a minute, and Fleur guessed this was to drop off the now drunk and disorderly settlers in all the small towns along the way, as John had warned. After a mighty rattle and shake, winding up through the ranges, past Beltana and onto Lee's Creek, she got the nod from John. It will be flat to Lyndhurst and then Farina's next. Well, then we're waiting for you, John, he laughed. Probably the whole family. And John had not lied. By the time the train sighed with a great bellow of steam into what had apparently the station at Farina, there were plenty of people standing alongside the equally small hut that served as a platform and tick office. There's my lot, John said, hanging out of the window. He yelled and waved, then dipped back into the carriage to grin at her. They're all here. Don't drift off. It's too dark. Let me introduce you. Chapter 32. Farina. Fleur was taken aback by how many people had been awaiting for the train. These can't all be for you, she quipped as John helped her to alight. The townsfolk like to come and collect their mail, he could explain, even at this time of night. It was past 11. What a strange time to arrive, but she was secretly grateful. She never seen skies like this, like those above her. It looked like black velvet sprinkled with millions of small diamonds. Again her mind roamed to Tom. She could finally understand his love of this landscape and his awkwardness in hers. Both of John's parents were at the station to meet their son, and Fleur stood back, watching his mother hug him, feeling her emotions tugging as she witnessed the affection between them. She was smartly dressed in a coat buttoned to her throat. John's father was slapping his arms with a proud smile, and Fleur thought John Bell looked extremely fine in his uniform for his homecoming. Plenty of other locals were hailing John, welcoming him back. Fleur wondered if anyone had done the same for Tom when he returned. Finally, John beckoned to her. She couldn't avoid it. There was a round of introductions to his parents, Jack and Eva, and also to his younger brother Bruce, who was looking adoringly at his older sibling. Flo guessed he was around 12. She graciously moved through those greetings, including from others who clustered around the family. She eagerly said hello to John, admiring his garb. Finally, John asked about Tom on her behalf. Tom Catch, love. Ah, now, I did see that lad, Eva replied. He came by to fetch some stores. Flo grinned, thrilled, so close now. Oh, good. He was headed out, though, Jack followed up. Headed out, Flo repeated. A trill up inside he sounding within herself like a lone bird calling into the night. Yes, John's father said, frowning as he tried to recall. I think he was joining a mob of fellas going north. I'm sure he was muttering to me about perhaps even travelling to Perth and into the great stations of the northwest. Fleur swallowed, but she couldn't fully hide the distress in her expression. Oh, look now, Eva exclaimed. We've upset you. You've come a long way, and it's very late. Is Tom your sweetheart, love? All Fleur could do was not unsure what to say. She dared not say fiancé because she wasn't sure how Tom was feeling about her right now. Brucey, run down to old Alf at the exchange. It will be closed, but he'll be around, and probably outside with some of the other blokes, and no home to bother with. Found out if the Witchelina mob have hauled out, Jack said. He looked at Fleur again apologetically. If anyone knows, it's Alf will. Hurry now, lad. Bruce paused only briefly to cast his big brother look, nodded consciously, and won a grin. See you back at the home, Brucey, John urged. I might even have something for you. They watched Bruce skip off into the darkness, patches of the town lit by minimal ambient light from the pubs, of which she could count 2 in the distance. They kept a few lights on so the blokes can see that they're weaving their way towards if they're in their cups, John explained. Very dark out here. In the meantime, you come with us, Eva said with a serious expression that brooked no protest. Fleur tried to protest, unsure what her next move might be if left alone. She had no plan. Oh no, I couldn't know. We insist, Eva said firmly. Come to the house while you wait for news at least, and help us celebrate having our boy home for a little while. The family store, which Fleur had remarked to John that yes, she would like to walk through, felt like an emporium and took her by surprise. Is there anything you don't have here? She asked him. Jack thought about an elephant feed, he said, and laughed. We try and have all that our folk around here could possibly need. It was obvious that Eva was keen to take Fleur to their home. Soon seated around the parlour table, Fleur stood to help But Eva immediately flapped her away. No, no, we have our girl to help, she said. Here she comes now, Frida. Tea for everyone, and how I like it, mind. She returned her gaze to Fleur. You go and join the others. Fleur noted the sleepy young woman, who had obviously been woken abruptly, or perhaps not permitted to go to sleep this evening until the young master returned. There were shades of Irma here, Fleur thought, learning as they made conversation that Eva was the organist for the Anglican Church and had a lot to do with Farina's Girl Guide troupe. She told Fleur how much she loved fine music and liked to travel to Adelaide to hear recitals. But I can never wait to get back to the desert, she said. Adelaide goes green all the time. Fleur blinked. She hadn't expected such a remark, imagining the woman pining for the snobbish sitting room of the resort capital. Is your family local, Eva? The woman nodded, smiling. I have 4 sisters here, and my mother came here as the school teacher before the Great War. She was very elegant, and the locals nicknamed her the Lady. I think most found her formidable, but that was because Mum was very popular and she liked to have afternoon tea with a silver service and a starched tablecloth. Eva looked around. Not like here with me, my 3 boys growing up around me, she said, but with affection. People said that when my mother invited you, she was like being invited by the Queen's mother. Fleur laughed, but hid her amusement that mother and daughter didn't seem so far apart in their habits. The Napier Bills lived well, which she noted, and Eva continued, I've done all right with my Jack. I think I'm privileged. I'm a privileged soul in Farina. I bathe daily in a fresh bucket of water. At Fleur's soft frown, she qualified her remark. Water's very expensive, and firewood is triple the price you pay in Adelaide. Bruce burst back in the room. Manners, young man, his mother remarked. Sorry, Miss Appleby, yes, the gang left yesterday. Fleur had never fully grasped the meaning of the phrase of a sinking heart, but she did now. It felt like hers had dropped several inches, and she had the sensation of being at the tallest point of a playground swing arc and then falling backwards in that inevitable downward sweep. But unlike the fun of a children's playground, she felt momentarily nauseated, almost dizzy with what she heard. Is Alf sure? Brucey. John pressed his brother. The lad nodded. He said he delivered the long necks into the wagon, plenty of them, he told me, and Tom Catchwell was at the reins. Tom told Alf he'd see him in 6 months or so. The walls of the Bell's house seemed to collapse inward, mimicking Fleur's mind, which seemed to invert it on itself. Gone, she whispered, I've missed him. John looked around awkward at his family and then took a step to crouch by where Fleur was that. Look, Fleur, I'm sure he'll make contact. He doesn't know I'm coming, John. He doesn't think I want him. He doesn't know yet I'm having his baby. Fleur heard Eva Bell gasp, noting the slight hitch of indignation. They were to be married. John snapped. They were to... Fleur heard Eva Bell gasp, noting the slight hitch of indignation. They were to be married. John snapped at his mother, but his attention was back at Fleur. I'm so sorry. We can try and get word to them, but not tonight, I doubt. Well, there's nothing for it, Fleur. Eva said. You shall have to stay here this evening. I can't have a young woman from the city walk off into the night in your condition. Did you have nowhere planned for you overnight? She has suddenly become haughty. No, Fleur bleated, feeling uncharacteristically helpless. In her mind, Tom would have learned she was here and come running, kicking up the dust behind him as he left off the drag wagon with the famous bunny he told her about, bravely pulling him all the way to Farina, as she had all those years ago when his mother had been in labour. But that clearly wasn't going to happen. She allowed herself to be ushered to a spare room that Eva Bell and Frida cuddly made up. She heard them telling her about the house and other mundane information, but none of it sunk in because reality was forcing its way through all the detail and her sorrow was crowding in. Bonnie was surely dead and Tom was no longer here. So why was she? She had no immediate future that held wedding bells and lots of smiles. Her love had disappeared, her mother dead, her father dead, an orphan again. She had not had the chance to explain the terrible lie. How could Irma have known? Fleur herself had barely realised what was happening in her body until she had count on the doctor signing a certificate as she arrived to help the bereaved family. They both stepped into the way, and while the family had their final farewells, you're looking a little perky to me, Fleur. Are you well? Dr. Parson asked. Oh, I'm fine, thanks. It's just, these last few months have been taxing. No doubt, no doubt, he said softly. Even so, Fleur, you look wan. You should come and see me. I'm fine, truly. He persisted. No symptoms of anything? She sighed, realizing he was not going to let it go. I seem to be very tired suddenly, lacking the energy I have always been able to count on. She shook her head with a wan smile. Just unused to my body not obeying. Oh, it will pass, as I say. It's been a rough few months, and I suppose this is the result of a lot of suppressed worry and well grief. Did you take much sugar? She hadn't expected that. No, not really. My father never did, and so I tended to copy him. I don't have a very sweet tooth. No real cravings, although, funny enough, she chuckled softly. Just for instance, all I want is ice cream, and I seem to want the smell of coal. He snapped to her a fresh glance. You crave them? She shrugged. Silly, I know, but if I do treat myself to an ice cream, all I do is sicken. When? When? Fleur repeated, confused. Yes, I'm guessing this isn't an isolated event, simply after ice cream. He peered at her over his spectacle. She blinked at the description. Well, the truth is, Dr. Parsons, I feel nauseated most mornings these days, usually when I awake, but the queasiness can hang around. I'm sure it's nothing. It was his turn to chuckle. Fleur, my dear, how are your monthlies? She stared at him, then her mouth slackened in surprise. Haven't seen one in a while, I'm guessing. Now her mouth opened, but she didn't know what to say because her throat was so dry, and all the words felt jumbled in the shock of what he was intimating. No, not intimidating, telling her. She cleared her throat. Surely not, she asked in a small voice. Well, as I'm presuming you know how it happens, I'm also presuming that ring on your finger was given to you by the young man in question. You better be suggesting to him that he come up with a wedding day and fast. He laughed. I met him. I liked him. He seemed moonstruck with you. When? At the police station. He came in with the goblins for some reason, rather banged up, and I asked him to let me check his wounds. A lance of blood blister that was keeping his eye closed. Anyway, we talked and Henry came up in conversation. Then you did, and well, he struck me as a resident fellow, but when it came to you, his eyes lit. I wish you much happiness, Fleur. Dr. Parsons, you won't. Not a soul, my dear Fleur. If you hurry, no one will be any the wiser. But now she missed Tom. If he wasn't home for 6 months, the baby would be nearly due. Would he want them? Could she convince him that this child was his and not Jimmy's? She began to cry, no hard sobs, but a leaking of tears that wouldn't stop as they dampened the pillow. She had no idea when she finally fell asleep and delivered her from her sorrow. Fleur was up early. She had no choice but to wear the special green dress she had bought especially Tom. He had once whispered to her that green was a colour that was missing in the outback. We had silver greens and greyish greens and even bluish greens, he explained, twirling her hair through his fingers. But my mother used to talk about the grass on her travels through Europe being the sort of luminous green, full of rich chlorophyll. She loved that Tom used words like this, and she wanted to smile, imagining what sort of expression would appear on Jimmy's Coglin's face if she mentioned chlorophyll to him. It wasn't about being superior, it was about knowledge and a love of learning and acquiring new information. This green, she talked about it a lot, and one day, I want to see it. We'll go together. He had smiled into her eyes. Fleur had searched and found a dress that was deep emerald with a small floral print in a lighter shade and a spot of black, like tiny flecks of ink beneath the flowers. The long sleeves were cuffed, and at her neck a length of the same fabric formed the collar and tied into a neat bow. She had known immediately that dress was for Tom, but she had no choice but to wear it now because she managed to get yesterday's dress rather grimy with all the changes of sea and the dust. She could wear it with her neat black brogues, as John had advised. Tom would never see her in the green he dreamed of, and she breathed out her frustration and melancholy, determined to not force her mood on anyone else. She arrived into the parlour before most in the family and stirred. Even Frida hadn't arrived, but it didn't take long for others to start emerging. Eva swept in, wearing a silken day dress. It seemed rather fancy for Farina, but Fleur admonished herself that she didn't know what was inappropriate or not for the region. You look lovely, Mrs. Bell. Thank you, dear. You, however, don't look as though you've slept. Flo gave a soft sigh. Not much, but I'm very grateful for your kindness and the bed, thank you. What do you plan to do? I shall go home. I gather there may be a returning train today. Either not as John arrived and not too far behind him. His brother Bruce. Flo's taking the morning train back to Adelaide, John. Perhaps you could accompany her to the station before our visitors start arriving. Eva urged. She looked back at Flo. I'm hosting a welcome for John, although I suspect it shall probably be more a farewell to my boy who's travelling to England. Flo nodded. So I hear. I'm sure the gathering will be splendid. So Flo, the gun is not terribly reliable, but even so, if it leaves Murray even close to its scheduled timetable, then it will be at Farina Station for 9. Frida should be here shortly, and I'm sure she will give you breakfast and pack up a small picnic for journey home. I must go and see to the table set for our guests, and so I will bid you goodbye now. Yes, of course. Thank you again. And if you ever visit Adelaide and can give me a little warning, I'll be delighted to take you for an afternoon at the South Australian Hotel. My, how grand, I'll be delighted. They embraced briefly, and then Mrs. Bell was going to attend to her hostess duties. So you're going, John asked, sounding sympathetic. She nodded yes, no reason to linger. I'm sorry, Fleur, don't be. No one's fault. I'm sorry about breaking down and being pathetic yesterday. It's been nothing to apologise for, and we're all rather upset for you in your condition. Flo smiled softly, imagining that Eva Bell likely couldn't wait for her, an unmarried pregnant woman, to be out of the house. But that was churlish, given the family had looked after her. She really was grateful, but she was also miserable, and it was hard to maintain her composure. Thank you for taking me back to the train. Where's your father? I should thank him too. He'll be in the store. Customers would happily have doors open all day and night. My uncle will be there too. She looked at her wristwatch. Less than an hour before they left for the station. Her departure couldn't come quick enough. They decided to walk to the station. I want to know I didn't leave without at least seeing the town that Tom was born into. Not a lot to see, John began, but Flo gasped. Look at that, she pointed as the long camel train in the distance moved slowly north. What are they carrying? Water, he explained. Those oblong containers either side of their humps are called shippers. That's how we move the water around to various places nearby. Amazing, she breathed. She only pre-existing camels at the zoo, and that thought reminded her of being there with Tom. She banished the memory, forbidding herself from getting upset again in front of John. Plenty of time ahead for that. That's the Bush Hospital, he said, pointing to it. It's an old hotel that's been converted. So that's where Moira Catchlove had given birth to Amy, and both had died, that poor family. Everywhere here was a reminder of Tom. John continued, unaware of her musings. Because you're travelling in daylight, you'll see some sights this time, maybe a long bullock train. You'll certainly see teams of donkeys pulling a load of wool towards the train. And camels, of course, they haul everything from food to ballot boxes and go as far as Cordillo Downs. He sounded impressed. Flo gave a grin as she shrugged. I have no idea where that is. Well, let's just say it's over 3 weeks' journey in one direction on a camel train. And still in South Australia, she sounded aghast. That's hard to imagine. Yep, it's a huge cattle station. And what's happening there? She said. Glad to have this interesting walk to take a mind off Tom. Oh, apparently they're dismantling the Catholic Church and moving it to Murraytown. Also, I'm told, good grief. In the distance, the gun signaled its imminent arrival with a loud blast on its horn, and Fleur and John watched great clouds of steam billowing up from the far away, dispersing against a cloudless, turquoise morning.